It was cool. It was a very, very cool system.
Yeah. I am going out to some fair or something out in Hillsborough tomorrow. I guess ETO and I will have a booth. Don't really know much about it, but show up and chat with people about solar.
And kind of Earth Day related. It's almost an Earth Day event.
Yeah. When was it? Yesterday? When
It's
actually was it? The
today, and
20th?
I was trying to figure it out because there were Earth Day events yesterday, but now it's Earth Day is today. Which, on that note, since it is 3 o'clock, and we do have some folks on the line now, welcome, and let's go ahead and get started. So my name is Zach Snyder. I'm a program manager with the nonprofit Solar Oregon. Super happy to be here with all of you today on Earth Day. Earth Day is obviously something that I look forward to a lot. I think that people as Jim just said, every day is Earth Day. That kind of is the ethos when you're in solar or in something related to, clean energy, renewable energy. But Earth Day, has a special significance. And so great to be here with you all. To me, there is nothing more Earth Day than diving deep into energy storage, because energy storage is just super, super important right now. So I hope that you are able to learn something if you're here to learn about energy storage for your own home or business, or just because you're curious about it. I hope that this leaves an impression on you and that we can answer a lot of questions for you today. So I just thought I'd throw up this image. This is from the cover of the New York Times in 1970, the first Earth Day. And yeah, I mean, it was a big thing at that time, and that was connected to, Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act. It was not long after that Solar Oregon was created. Not, I think, because of Earth Day. We were more created because of the energy crisis in the 1970s. But we've been around also for quite a while. And so it's been interesting for me personally to learn the history of Solar Oregon, and of course, to reflect a little bit on the history of Earth Day. So happy Earth Day again to everybody. Let's take a look at what we are going to cover today. So I'm going to kick us off with a welcome and an introduction, and a short slide deck going over what is energy storage. You may be wondering, you may have heard terms like energy storage, battery. Are those the same thing? Where does that go and what does that do in the home? I'll give you those foundations here in a few slides. And then we are really here today as a roundtable to welcome our panelists, Lucas and Jim, who I will introduce after that slide deck. And we'll have a fun panel discussion. We'll dig a little bit deeper on what is energy storage and how can you think of it. And then we want to open it up to an audience Q&A. So if you're here and whether or not you've been to a past Solar Oregon event, maybe you have and you know a little bit about energy storage, or maybe this is your first time, please feel free. There's no bad questions. We want to answer all your questions. And in a second, I'll show you the Q&A function here on Zoom. And to just give you an example here, this image on the left is an energy storage system. And so we're going to walk into what is that. So I'm not going to do the full intros here, but you guys, I had to put your photos up twice. So I have you in the intro here too. So I'll introduce you in a second. A little bit about Solar Oregon. Like I said, we're 40 years old. Our mission is to educate and advocate to increase solar adoption and the adoption of things related to solar, like energy storage. And we do that through educational webinars, workshops. We have How to Go Solar and Storage workshop that we put on at least once a month. We have solar tours, like our Solar Winery Tour, which is our annual fundraiser that's going to be this summer, as well as the Go Zero Tour, which is going to be in October. And that is a tour of zero energy homes. So if you're wondering, how do you think about your overall energy consumption in your house, in a new home or an old home, that's a great event for that. And we also put on things like Solarize campaigns, where we help whole communities go solar together. We are a membership-based nonprofit. So if you are a member or a donor of Solar Oregon, thank you so much, because that really allows us to do what we do and to bring this great content to you. If you're not a member or donor, please consider becoming one. I think Kate is going to drop a link in the chat. It's the same one you see here on the screen. So that is much appreciated. And last but certainly not least, a huge thank you to Energy Trust of Oregon. Energy Trust provides support for this specific webinar, as well as other educational programming that Solar Oregon provides. They're an independent nonprofit. They serve customers of the main big utilities here. So Portland General Electric, Pacific Power, and they provide incentives for renewable energy like solar and also energy efficiency. They have a lot of information and potential resources for you if you're trying to improve how you use energy in your home or business. And so let's take a look at the Zoom platform. I think a lot of us are pretty aware, but just in terms of how we'll be using the different functions in this webinar, you'll see, especially if you mouse over the bottom of your screen, a little toolbar that we have a chat button. And so Kate will be dropping links in there. There's already some links in there for you. You can click and you can also just say hi in the chat. If you have questions, and we really do want to answer your questions, please put that in the Q&A box. That's where this Q&A button is on the right. If you raise your hand, that really does nothing in my classroom. So I'm sorry about that. So if you have a question, put it in the Q&A box and we'll answer it at the end. And I think that we're going to skip polls for right now and go straight on to the solar plus storage. So this is just a little bit of introduction, a little bit of foundation before we jump in. And the first thing I want to hit is, what is energy resilience? So this is an image of a power outage in a city, and a single building that's on, that has the ability to use power, keep the lights on during that outage. What gives it that ability? Well, technologies like energy storage and solar, so we often call that solar plus storage, are a really great solution for that. And so what we're focusing on is the storage side of this. But I really want to illustrate or just emphasize that solar and storage, they're like peanut butter and jelly. They work really well together and they make each other better. And also, I want to clear up a misunderstanding, a common misunderstanding, which is that solar by itself does not give you the ability to use power without a battery. There are a couple of little exceptions to that, a couple technologies that kind of give you an ability to do that. But really, for the most part, if you want to be able to use power when the grid is down, you'll need a battery. So why might we think of energy resilience in Oregon? And if you've seen our How to Go Solar Plus Storage webinar before, you might have seen this and a couple other slides before. Well, there are outages all the time. And so if you live in a city, you live near downtown, you may have few outages, but if you live a little bit farther out towards the end of the line, as it is, you may experience more frequent outages. So you might have an outage every couple of months. I've talked to people who have an outage every month, and it's maybe just for an hour, or sometimes even just for 20 minutes, but it can be disruptive when it happens. Those typical outages very commonly are caused by storms and squirrels. There are other rarer but potentially more impactful events that might be harder to deal with that we also expect in Oregon. So one of those is that we know that we have increasing wildfire risk, especially due to climate change, and utility companies are increasingly turning off power to parts of their grids. That might be a whole town or a whole part of a county to prevent their infrastructure from starting wildfires when it's very hot and windy. And so we've had our first public safety power shutoffs in Oregon in 2020 when we had our really dangerous fire season that year, and we expect more in the future. In addition, cyber attacks, that's something that may sound a little bit fantastical or far-fetched, but it is certainly a concern of the Oregon Department of Energy and of the Department of Energy in general, because our grid infrastructure technically is vulnerable. And if you have been in Oregon for a while, you are probably aware that we are expecting a big earthquake, the big one. And when that happens, it's expected that the Willamette Valley and that whole part of Oregon will potentially lose power for up to 6 weeks. And if you're on the coast, it might be even longer. So that's an awfully long time to lose power. So again, we're here to talk about one of the technical solutions to that, and that is solar plus storage. And this is just to show you what we mean. So when we say solar, we mean solar panels if you're in a house, typically on the roof, though they could be on a ground mount. And then storage is this battery in the garage. And it's the connection of those systems into your home or business. Often people are familiar with just one type of battery, but you should know that there are a number of options when it comes to batteries. And we might expect that there will be new options in years to come. However, this slide is just to say that there may be good solutions that are the one that you have not heard of yet. So talk to a solar contractor and they'll be able to point you in a good direction. And one of the things we like to talk about most when it comes to energy storage is the difference between a partial and a whole home backup. And that is because people have wild expectations sometimes about what a battery can achieve and accomplish. And it's really important to dial those in, because batteries do a really important thing and they do it really well. But exactly how much of your home they can back up and reasonably power for a meaningful length of time is where we need to kind of dial in our expectations. So typically when you get one battery, you're going to have what is called a partial home backup. And that is where you select certain circuits in your home. So you know how you have a breaker panel, you take some of those breakers and you only back those specific circuits up with the battery. And so that's a partial home backup. The rest of your home will not have power when there's an outage still. It'll just be those ones you select. The whole home backup you can achieve, though it often requires multiple batteries, sometimes 3 or 4. So important to note that in case you're thinking that you want to have outdoor concerts and a jacuzzi going when the power is out, you might want to talk with your contractor about that. So this is what a whole home backup may look like. You might have multiple batteries. That's just to give you a sense of you can do it, and that's what it looks like, though of course that does incur extra cost. When you are sizing your system, just generally, you typically ask yourself 2 questions. What needs power? Those are those circuits you're backing up, and for how long? And these graphics here, just to show you, this is what you're weighing. This is what you're balancing. So you will talk to your contractor, and the process of that conversation will be to determine, the right balance between these 2 things. How much to back up versus how long. This is what it looks like when you move those breakers that you select into a new sub panel. It's an additional electrical panel, and that is what is powered by your battery. So you'll still have your main electrical panel, but when you have a partial home backup, you put those breakers that you want to back up into a separate panel. And that's what that looks like. So with that foundation, I guess just one last note here. If you are a home or business owner and you are interested in energy storage and you're like, I'm ready for a quote right now, there's a great tool that you can use to connect with 3 really highly rated contractors in your area. And it's provided by Energy Trust of Oregon. And Energy Trust of Oregon not only provides great incentives and information, they also rank solar contractors, and they call them their trade allies. They rank them and they make sure that they're performing good work. So if you are looking for energy storage, you should look for a trade ally contractor from Energy Trust of Oregon. And this tool, which Kate, I think just dropped the link in the chat, is a really quick tool. You just fill in some of your information. The tool talks a lot about solar, but it's the same thing for energy storage. You can use this tool for that too. And you'll be contacted by 3 contractors, and they'll provide you with 3 free quotes. So great place to start. So with our foundation firmly beneath us, I am very excited to begin our panel discussion roundtable. So I am excited to introduce first Lucas Miller from Mayfield Renewables. And Lucas has been heavily involved in the solar industry since 2017 and currently works at Mayfield, an Oregon-based technical consultancy focused on solar and energy storage projects and products. Previously, Lucas worked for a residential and commercial solar contractor in Portland and is a former board member of Solar Oregon. Lucas holds a business degree from the University of Wisconsin and is also working toward a post-bachelor's degree in renewable energy engineering from the Oregon Institute of Technology. Welcome, Lucas. Really great to see you as always, and glad we can have you here today. Also would like to welcome Jim Steiner from Sunbridge Solar. Jim is an estimator and educator with Sunbridge, which is a locally owned and operated solar and battery installer. He lives in Vancouver, Washington with his family and has been in solar for 7 years. Sunbridge specializes in Enphase, which is a company of batteries, in Enphase storage projects, and are proud to be a certified B Corp. So welcome, Jim. Really great to have you here today. So I am going to stop sharing so we can see our beautiful faces. And first, I would just love to hear, and I think our audience would love to hear, how did you become an energy storage professional? And what exactly do you do? So I'll kick it to both of you, but maybe we can start with Lucas.
Sure. Thanks, Zach. And thanks for having me, and happy Earth Day to everyone. So you did a great job. Perfect introduction. So I currently work at Mayfield Renewables. We are a consultancy, so we really do quite a bit, but we work with manufacturers, service providers, and installers throughout the solar and energy storage industries. So we help them with system design and engineering. We also help them on a business and strategic side. So we could be helping to build a plan set for a commercial facility that wants solar and a battery. But on the flip side, we could also be helping a manufacturer build a go-to-market strategy or doing a product review for a new battery that's coming out. So it's a wide range of things, all to say that we kind of have our hands in every level of the industry. And it's a really exciting time to be in the industry. In terms of what led me here, I really grew up in a family that was focused on environmentalism and conservation, but just growing up in Wisconsin in a particularly cold climate and seeing those winters get warmer and warmer and warmer and warmer as I was growing up really steered me heavily toward that as a career. And then researching the most impactful ways to fight climate change kind of led me more in the energy generation and storage side of things. So straight out of college, I moved to Portland to work with Elemental Energy, another contractor here in Portland. And then since then, I've bounced around a little bit, been involved with Solar Oregon, Twende Solar, and other organizations in the area, and landed where I'm currently at. I think you're muted, Zach.
Oh, great. Yeah, Jim.
Yeah, I got into solar about 7, 8 years ago. I was living up in Longview, Washington, and my son had just started kindergarten, and they were trying to put a coal export terminal like a mile downwind from my kid's school. And that's kind of what got me into, the environmental aspect of things, door knocking, phone treeing. We blocked that terminal in Longview, but now all that coal is just going by rail to Vancouver, BC, and then out. So I felt really discouraged that all that work really didn't do anything. Had a friend from college who worked at Solar City, and he got me an interview in Portland. And I figured if I go into solar it's not going to happen overnight. This is a generational transition that we will be making as a species, but every customer that I educate and help go solar is just one step in the right direction. Getting back to involvement in battery backup, it was almost exclusively solar or PV photovoltaic only when I first started. But then working for Solar City Tesla, you started to see more batteries. Their Powerwall product was one of the early like mass produced products. And then at Sunbridge, I've been here about 4.5 years now. We've seen year over year just an increase of our portfolio. I'd say about 15-20% of our projects these days have some type of battery component to them. And I would guess 5-10 years from now, it's going to be half our jobs are going to have some type of storage components. And here at Sunbridge, we've kind of seen everything under the sun, everything you had on that slide, to Generac, to Outback systems, in phases battery systems. There's a lot of different options out there now, not just one or two products.
Great. Yeah, and you kind of snuck into my next question here, which is how quickly are batteries becoming popular in Oregon? And I was working at an installation company in 2018, and I remember it was like they were there, like, they were being installed, but it was really like nothing. It just seems like it's exploded, right? And maybe like, so you talked a little bit about like how that has progressed in the past. And I'm just kind of wondering, you who interact with people every day about this topic, and who are actually, taking the leap and installing storage, where do you see this going? Is this something that you expect to increase at that kind of like exponential pace?
Yeah, I do. I feel it's a combination of people getting small basic systems just for the resiliency when you're in town, especially with people working from home and all the uncertainty in the market and in the world. It kind of makes people feel a little bit more secure. I also feel with home prices going the way they are, seen as a percentage of your home's value, battery systems are the cheaper than they ever have been and better than they ever have been. Like you hinted at, a majority of our projects are kind of more rural. You're on a well, you're out in Estacada and your power goes out twice a month, you're on a well, you don't have water when you don't have power. We're seeing a lot of people do projects like that. And it is, like you said, Zach, it was like, we did 1 or 2 or 3 a year. And now it's like, we're doing 1 or 2 or 3 a month. So.
That's great. So Lucas, there are a lot of people in the Solar Oregon community who may already have solar on their home or business, and maybe wondering can I still, get an energy storage system and tie that in there? And I've got a couple of images that you shared. And so can I pull those up and maybe you can walk us through, and together we can kind of answer that question?
Sure, absolutely.
All right, can you guys see the slide? All right, there we go.
Perfect. So what we're looking at here is just a high level system schematic. So these are the key components that need to be put together in order to get a solar array on your roof and have that power sent to your home. So what you'll see here, starting from the left, moving to the right, you've got your PV array. Those are your solar modules all connected together. Then that arrow takes you to the inverter. And then coming out of that, we go to your main service panel and then the grid. If you notice on those arrows, there's those little bubbles with lines. The line on the left is a straight line with some dots below it. The line on the right is squiggly. That denotes DC and AC power, which is a key distinction when we're looking at these. So direct current DC just refers to what the electrons are doing. So your electricity is nothing more than just electrons moving one direction or another. If it's DC, they're all moving the same way, versus AC, alternating current, they'll be shifting back and forth at a specific frequency. So if you notice on the system here, go ahead, Zach, do you have a question?
The technical terms though are dotted and squiggly, right?
Right. Yeah. But for today, we'll call them AC and DC. So on the left, you'll notice DC with that straight line. That signifies that the power coming out of your PV or your solar array is DC. All the electrons are going in one direction and one direction only. That's great, but your house and the loads that you need to power in your home are almost all run on alternating current power. So we need to translate that from DC to AC, which is what the inverter does for us. So in its simplest form, this is our base system. If you just have solar on your roof, you're going to have that solar array. It's churning out direct current DC power. Then you have one other big piece of equipment, the inverter, which is there to invert that power from DC to AC, so then it can power your home. And then Zach, if you want to move forward, we've got a couple more, and bear with me. I know this looks like a lot. You can ignore virtually all of the gray boxes and components other than the array, the inverter, this new inverter, and then the energy storage in the bottom left. So if you'll remember the slide before, this upper left section is the same. So if you're someone who already has solar on your roof, or you're interested in just getting solar, that's the same system as before. So that is the core of it. That's what you're starting with. What we're looking at here is if you were to have that existing system and then you add a battery on top of it. So
this is like everybody who's already got solar, who's interested in battery storage. This is, if they wanted to see a diagram, this would be the diagram of what it would look like on their home, right?
Right. Of course, there are exceptions for everything, but generally this is what it's going to be. This will be the additional components required. And the arrows help to illustrate how everything is tied together. So if we're looking at this as a flow, so coming out of solar, moving into that interactive inverter, our now AC power is going into that backup loads panel you talked about earlier, Zach. So those are the things that you want to stay on during a power outage. That same AC power is connected to the second inverter. This is a new one that you would have to install along with your battery. The battery, much like solar, is producing power that's DC, and it also needs to take in power that's DC to charge. So everything, whether it's going in or out, you'll notice the arrow there is bidirectional. So power coming into the battery to charge it, going out of the battery into your home. In both cases, that's DC power. So what that means in this case is we have converted our power from the solar from DC to AC. We need to convert it one more time back to DC in order to charge our battery. That's what that second inverter is doing, is that second layer of conversion. So you can charge the battery from your solar, and you can also send power directly from your battery into your home as AC power.
Cool. And so this whole, like everything, if we're looking at this, like the inverters are like the middle line, right? And there where the transition happens, everything on the left is DC land. Everything on the right is AC land. And the point is that you already have an inverter with your solar system. And so you're adding another inverter to get to the batteries. Is that correct? Like,
yes, that's correct. Someone asked a really good question actually, which is that inefficient to have to convert twice? The short answer is yes. I mean, it does. It's not a perfect conversion to use an inverter. So going DC to AC or AC to DC, you lose a little bit of power every time you do that. So this system does have some inefficiency in that you are losing a little bit of power by converting twice. However, the cost compared to completely revamping the system to only use one inverter typically makes this a more sensible solution. But Zach, if you want to move to the next one, I think that's actually a really good transition. So in comparison to that system we just looked at, which again is typically what will happen if you already have solar and you're adding a battery to it. So you typically will also have that second inverter. In this case, we're doing both at the same time. So maybe you don't have solar, you know you want it, you're also comfortable getting a battery installed at the same time. You do it all at once, and this is what you may end up with, where there's one single inverter. And if you notice those arrows on the left side, so the DC arrows, you'll see that we're bypassing that conversion here. So you're coming from solar down through the inverter, but it's actually not inverting the power. It is sending that DC straight into the battery. So in this scenario, you can charge directly from your solar, all with DC power without converting. So this system is slightly more efficient. It also, it's fairly easy to install, but if you already have an existing array, the cost to redesign big components of the system and to take out that first inverter, those costs are typically too much to justify redesigning the entire system to make it something like this. So again, the apples to oranges comparison here is going to be, this is the system you would probably end up with if you're looking to install both at once. So one inverter, same backup loads panel exists, and you're still connected to the main service panel. Whereas the system we just looked at before is more of a retrofit situation where you're adding a battery to an existing solar system.
Great. Thank you for walking us through this. I love these diagrams. If you're not a diagram person and this is like crazy for you, don't worry about it. But I think that's just, it's really neat to see how what it looks like. Cause if I'm a solar homeowner, right, and I'm wondering what does it look like to get energy storage, it's like, oh, cool. There's like an extra inverter, but it's like the cheapest option. Jim, do you want to give some, insight? I mean, you're talking to people installing these, right? And maybe just kind of like give us your perspective on like, are you selling a lot of energy systems to solar homeowners?
Yeah, and when I'm meeting with somebody that already has solar, the battery system they're going to go with often is dictated by the equipment they already have in place. Kind of getting at what Dan is asking, the efficiency difference. There might only be like a 5 to 7% loss in total difference between a DC and an AC system, and that's only the power going into and out of the battery. If you're on grid, it's still a single conversion. And if you're talking 5% annually on a system, let's assume all that power went through, that might be a few dollars a year in power loss. And for us to completely revamp and avoid that inefficiency, if it's going to cost you $8,000 in material to get that 5%, it's not worth it. So often you're kind of going to go with what is the most cost effective route. And the only thing that hasn't really been mentioned here, and it is a type of technology that's a lot more common, is just microinverters. But it's the same concept, except each individual panel in this diagram would have its own microinverter, and then it's just straight AC coming off of the roof.
Awesome. And have you like sold an energy storage system to solar homeowners? Is that something that you personally have done, or is that like, you think that's like rare or common?
It's not as common, but usually, if you have a string inverter system that we can install, like the Tesla Powerwall is an AC coupled system, so it's kind of agnostic to what was done before. It has its own inverter and system. Or if let's say you had a Solar Edge inverter, we might be able to just replace that with a battery or a storage capable inverter, and then that's the only piece of equipment that we're replacing. If you have, let's say you have old in-phase microinverters, you might have to replace those microinverters, or some of the older microinverters are still compatible with the current battery system, so you don't have to change anything. You can just come back in and put the system in. So it's hard to give a kind of a blanket answer, but yes, it's, there's probably a dozen different type of arrangements in the Portland metro area. So there's a dozen different answers and right solutions per job. And sometimes we can't even do it. Like if the right solution is a product that my company doesn't install, I'll just tell them and say, hey, here's the bid, but I wouldn't go that route because we have to use this type of equipment. It's going to be a lot more cost than if you go with, call XYZ contractor. They might be able to get that battery system that's a better fit for what you already have in place.
Gotcha. Yeah. So if I'm a homeowner, that doesn't know one of these like 8 different setups that I might have, that doesn't matter, right? You guys know, you can figure out all the details.
You'll want, if you're a homeowner that already has solar, you're going to reach out to the contractor that did your work originally. They're going to know the system the best. To find whatever book or whatever info, often I get calls and like, I don't know. It's like, well, I can't tell you, what you need until I have more information. I'll go out to your house and like look at all that. But, before you just start calling people, get a little info on the system that you have to start giving to those people. It'll save them a lot of time.
Gotcha. Great. Well, thank you both for walking us through that. And that kind of, I think, leads me to another great question, which is it worth it to get storage without solar? Because, I was talking earlier about solar plus storage. That's something that we talk about a lot. And increasingly, we don't even have a how to go solar workshop anymore. We have a how to go solar plus storage workshop. And people often still go solar without storage, but is it worth it to go storage without solar? And this is for both of you.
Lucas, you go first.
I'm curious what your answer is, Jim, but I would say in all likelihood, probably not. I mean, of course, it's on a case-by-case basis, but the main reason for doing that would strictly be for backup purposes in an outage, or potentially to save money on your electricity bills. But for how cheap electricity is here in Oregon, so for example, in California, you could absorb power from the grid when it's cheap with your battery and then sell it back to the grid or use it at your home when it's expensive. But here in Oregon, power is cheap all day long. So in that sense, it's harder to pencil out. And then beyond that, if you're just looking for backup when the power does go out, there are plenty of other alternatives. I hate to say it, but traditional generators also work for that at a fraction of the cost. But Jim, I'm curious if you hear that often from people and if you'd have a different answer.
Yeah, I would agree with you that I have not sold battery standalone without solar, and I probably won't. I've talked 2 or 3 people out of doing that because, let's say you have a battery, power goes out, your battery's drained over a day or 2, you're in this, and the power's still out, you're in the same position you were at before. There's a couple other financial reasons why you may, it is a very rare thing, and I don't think many people would do it. Once you crunch the numbers, you can't get the federal tax credit if you do just a battery without solar. You can't get the Oregon Department of Energy $2,500 storage incentive if you don't have solar, if you're just doing a battery system. And from a purely environmental standpoint, a large battery that isn't going to have the utility of a small gas generator, that gas generator over the 10-15 year life of the battery might have a smaller environmental impact than the actual battery itself. So but once you add this solar's ability to create fuel for that battery and energy for that battery, then it changes the whole dynamic of it. So long story short, I wouldn't do it. You mentioned time of use, where in California, power might be 40 cents at some times a day and 6 cents at sometimes. So you can kind of buy low, sell high with the battery. Anytime I've crunched the numbers here in the Portland area, the delta is too small. And you're talking like, yeah, I saved $300 a year and I paid 20 grand for this battery. It's never going to pay for itself. Even in California, where that delta is larger and you can save more on your power bill having a battery, the battery's never really going to pay for itself on that pure cost differential.
Great. I do see, I think, a couple of questions going in the chat. If you could put those in the Q&A box, we'll try to hit those ones first, and then we can pick up any ones we didn't catch in the Q&A box in the chat. But please do continue to put in questions. Again, we're going to have that Q&A at the end. And Jim, this is another good segue into how much does a storage system cost? And I know that that's an unfair question because there's a lot of things that can make cost vary. And I know that from solar, because when I give an example budget for a solar system, I'm like, okay, well, this is an average, you're assuming a certain size. And also it's assuming this, and this about your home. So is there any kind of statement about the cost? And then maybe you can walk people through the available incentives.
Yeah, sure. So I would say most battery systems on the low end, you're talking probably $14,000 to $15,000 or so, and then on up. That's before any incentives and tax credits. We install the Enphase IQ battery systems. It's a 10 kilowatt hour reservoir, and no, just a really clean, easy install, nothing complicated. Starts at about 18,000, 18,500 or so. And they're currently in Oregon. There is an Oregon Department of Energy incentive that's $2,500. It acts as an upfront coupon similar to the ODOE and ETO solar incentives. So that actually gets paid to the solar installer to reduce the customer's out-of-pocket cost. So in that example, that the out-of-pocket for that type of battery system would be about $16,000. You do get the federal tax credit on that, which is currently 26% of whatever you spend. So now you're down to more like $12,000, $13,000 out of pocket. That is for backed up loads, a very, like you were talking about, fridge, lights, a couple routers, or a router and a couple plugs for charging cell phones and devices. So very limited. And then on up to, once you're getting into well pumps or whole home backup, you're in the 30 to 40,000 on up price range. So it's still a pretty expensive project, but you're buying the long-term security.
Gotcha. Great. And yeah, I heard you mention the ODO incentive. Did you mention the federal tax incentive, the credit?
Yes. So yeah, the federal tax credit, as long as your battery system is tied to your solar and charged with the solar, then the battery system is part of your solar project. So then you can claim the federal tax credit on your out of pocket as the customer after the state incentives come off.
And that's 26% right now, right? And but you have to have the tax liability. So that's
Correct.
The thing about a tax credit. So.
Yeah. You have 5 years to claim that tax credit. So let's say you had a $10,000 tax credit, but you only pay $4,000 a year in taxes. It'll just roll over until you use it up. But if you are retired, have no income, pay no taxes, it's not just a straight check to you. Most people, if you're still working or have some type of retirement, you're going to have that tax liability, but definitely chat with your CPA, understand how that works, and know it's not just a check that you're getting back after you install. You install today in April or May of 2022, you're not getting that till spring of 2023 when you get your federal tax return.
Great. All right, so I want to revisit this. I know I hit this in my slides at the beginning a little bit, but again, something that I really love to talk about over and over again is setting expectations with what can a system provide, and you've both kind of hit on that a little bit. But Lucas, you shared with me another diagram, and it's an example of how you would size a system, and that might give us an idea if you're in your own home thinking, okay, how does this conversation at least look, right? So, and then Jim, maybe afterward you can kind of share a little bit since you actually have those conversations with people. So I'm gonna go ahead and bring that back up here.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks, Zach. So again, please don't be overwhelmed looking at this. We're not going to go through it line by line, cell by cell. This is just a visualization of roughly what we're doing when we're actually sizing a system for a home. So you're going to work in reverse. As Zach touched on earlier, it all starts by looking at what loads are in your house, what do you want to have backed up when the power goes out, and then how long do you want to have that backup power available, assuming that the grid is still down. So what we have here is a table of all hypothetical loads, but just things that you might find in a typical home that you may or may not want to have backed up. So these numbers, again, are all hypothetical, but this is just a walkthrough of the calculations that the contractor or the designer for your system would be doing when sizing your battery. So we're going to start by looking at, what do I want backed up? What is the power that requires, how long is that piece of equipment on per day, and then pulling that out and looking at it at a weekly basis. So on average, if you look at the far right column now, so the average energy demand per day per load is what we're looking at. And then we're adding those all together. And the sum of that is the overall capacity that the battery would need to have in order to supply your home to meet those loads for the typical amounts of time that you use them, for the intended duration that you need them. So in the very bottom right, we have autonomy here, just a fancy way of us saying how many hours would you want this to work, assuming that both the grid is down and the sun is not shining. So strictly looking at the worst case scenario, it's super cloudy out. Maybe we've even got a fire, God forbid, and there's limited sun coming onto your system. We're really just running off of the battery here. How long could that go for? So once we've looked at your loads, added them all together, thought about how long we would need this for, we can get a sense for what size of battery you'll need. Then based on the size of the battery, we'll look at how much solar you need to charge that battery and to keep it sufficiently charged. So if the grid does go down, you've got your battery set up well with a certain percentage of charge ready to go to keep these loads powered. So again, very high level overview there. It's all to say there's a lot that goes into it, and there's a lot of thought that's required from the homeowner and the contractor. So it's something that a lot of people don't consider going into it, but you do need to start isolating pieces of your home, certain outlets, certain appliances that you would see yourself using when the grid was out. Or maybe you have, medication in the refrigerator that you need 24/7. That's got to make it on this list. If you need access to Wi-Fi, there's certain outlets you need with your modem. All of those things that you might not normally be thinking about are a key part of this process.
Yeah, awesome. Jim, do you want to, what's your perspective?
Yeah, I usually go in asking, like, if the power goes out right now, what are the 5 things you need? And I start with that. And the most common answers are refrigerator, lights, if you're on a well, AC. Air conditioning can be challenging because often you'll have those on a 40 or a 50 amp breaker, and you need 2 or 3 batteries to power that. So it kind of depends on exactly what loads you want backed up. And then, the more deep dive conversation before you get to a final install is this type of worksheet where you chat with the customer and say, okay, here are the things that are going to be backed up. Or, if you're running your whole panel, you're going to drain your battery in 8 hours. So when the power goes out, you need to know how to manage your own system and shed loads by turning loads off, so your hot tub's not running and draining your battery overnight. But there is an educational component to it. So if you are really interested in batteries, it is something that don't just go, I want it done, I don't want to think about it. You've got to learn and spend a little time knowing how much power you use. Or, you don't have to get this nitty gritty. A salesperson or an educator is going to kind of simplify that conversation, but it has to be something that you're involved with.
And then one other thing I would add there too is to also be forward looking if you're making these calculations. So if you're considering an EV in the future and you might possibly want that to be included on this, then that is something to explore and to communicate with your contractor. And that goes for other large appliances as well. Maybe you want to put an HVAC system in your home, a heat pump, even a hot tub. Really, any electrical loads that you might be considering adding over the coming years are worth mentioning at that stage of the installation, because that is really the time to determine what is going in the backup loads panel and also what we might need to leave space for in the future.
Great. Yeah, thanks both of you for walking us through this. I want to make sure we've got time for Q&A. So I think maybe we'll just hit one more question here on the panel, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. And if we can keep it not too long, but Jim, I think something that I talk a lot about in relation to solar is, what makes a good home for solar, because there are things about your home. If you're a homeowner, you know that homes are complex and it takes some maintenance, and maybe there are some things that you need to take care of, or maybe there are some things you can't. It's not really about maintenance, but just aspects of your home that make it easy or difficult to go solar. Some of that has to do with the light falling on the roof or how much roof space you have. Obviously, a battery in the garage might be a little bit different, but are there things that can prevent you from getting energy storage?
Yeah, space, especially these houses in the Portland area where there's nowhere to put the battery, or the only place to put the battery is, you have an electrical panel on the north side of the house, and the only place to put the battery is on the south side of the house, and that's an expensive conduit run. You're either going through sheetrock and remodeling your house, or you're going through a basement, or you're wrapping the belly of the house and going around the concrete band. So sometimes the logistics and the space required for the actual equipment can be a barrier, or limit, like, I want 2 or 3 batteries, but I only have room for 1. So I have to just kind of work with what I'm living with. Often, if you have a really old breaker panel, sometimes you'll have to, in order to be up to code and safe, you get a new electrical panel. But those are the main impediments to battery storage that I see.
Great. Thanks. All right. Man, we've covered a lot of ground. It's been kind of technical. And so again, we want to make sure that this is not, we're hitting the right balance here. If you have questions and you're like, I don't know really what you said, that sounded like a bunch of, just something I couldn't understand. Feel free to just ask like a really simple question too. So I'm going to pull up the Q&A now. Thank you so much to Lucas and Jim, to both of you. And I'm going to pitch these questions to us. So first one I see here is not really a question. I'm going to come back to that later. Can you address the status of car batteries as solar storage and the ability of power to go both ways to and from a vehicle battery? And whoever feels most confident.
I can really start with this. I get this one a lot. If you had a check for $400,000 and gave it to me, there's not a product for me to buy or a permit process in the Portland area to accomplish this. It's on the horizon. It's an awesome concept, but it is not here yet. So we will see. If I had to guess, I'd say it's going to be 3 to 5 years before you have solar batteries and cars in the Portland area trading power back and forth.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by this question too. And I think it's something that the whole industry is thinking about, but like Jim said, we're just not there yet. The Ford Lightning ads are really cool, but your home still needs electrical upgrades to even make that happen. And I'd also just generally try to discourage people from waiting too long to adopt these technologies when perfectly adequate battery systems do exist today on the market that are probably just as cost effective as a car would be in the future. So if you're considering home energy storage, but thinking maybe I should wait until the Ford Lightning comes on board and I can do both at the same time, that may not happen for 5 years. So given the status of, especially the federal incentive has 2 years before it fully sunsets as of now, I would heavily encourage people who are interested and in a financial position to move forward to do so, or at least explore doing so in the near term, to take full advantage of those incentives that we do know exist and to use this technology that we know will work with a typical home.
Great. Next question here is there solar to hydrogen available? And that's I think a really interesting question. And man, takes us into like a whole other realm of energy. And I don't know if either of you feel any confidence to be able to answer. I've been a little bit keeping track of what the hydrogen folks are up to. basically you can create hydrogen, it's called green hydrogen, from electricity. And you could do that, well, it's green if you create it from solar electricity. And so that's something that, what's a good analogy? I certainly wouldn't expect that at your home. And certainly not for many, many, many years. And really that whole concept is, it's as if we're kind of in like the days of Edison, you know what I mean? Like people are kind of tinkering with making it, I mean, it works as a technology, but in terms of making it like a standard kind of practice, it's very much an innovative space. So great question. I love it, but maybe let's move on to some more traditional kind of energy storage for the home and business here. So question, what kind of studies have been done on lithium ion battery recycling? This seems like an easy argument for anti-solar / storage people to make. I don't know if you guys want to.
Yeah, I mean, I can start, Jim. I'm sure you hear this from people all the time and can probably speak to it better than I can. My understanding is that lithium batteries are mostly recyclable. It kind of depends on who you talk to and where you go. There's certainly a lot of organizations just getting started now that see that as a future business endeavor. And there really is a lot of investment going into battery recycling. But if we're thinking today in this very moment, you can recycle lithium ion batteries. You just have to take it to a very specific organization dedicated to doing that. But Jim, I don't know if you have anything more to add to that.
Yeah, I'd agree with what you just said. The catch-22 is there's not enough old batteries yet to justify a large factory here. So that will change, especially I would say most of the volume driving that is more of the electric vehicle space, less of the residential home space. Like somebody in the comments, you got 80 kilowatt hours of battery in your car and a 10 kilowatt hour battery in your house. The ratio of car to home is much different, but the state, Washington and Oregon State and California are starting programs. I envision a future. What I would love to see is consumers paying the recycling cost for the cradle to grave cycle of that battery up front, so that they know when the battery is done, it will be taken. They can recycle and reuse as much as possible. On the videos I've seen, they basically like put it in these big acidic chemical baths and it all just kind of diffuses to its separate elements, and then you recycle those. And I'm sure there's a lot of inefficiencies and a lot of waste and a lot of, as long as that's not getting into streams and done properly, then in theory that can be a closed loop or something that's a little bit more sustainable. But I do hear that environmental argument against it, and it is true, kind of harkens back to the whole why get just a battery without solar. There's a footprint there.
That's great. Thanks, guys. Question from Ole here. We have 2 electric vehicles with 84 kilowatt hours battery storage. I understand the storage is much larger than most home storage systems. I think I know where this is going. Besides plugging into the cigarette lighters to tap this storage for emergency use, are there any kits that would allow better use of batteries during emergencies? So maybe this is a question not just about plugging into the home, but is there a way to kind of tap into your EV battery during an outage in a more meaningful way without having that, vehicle to home connection? And I personally do not know of any technologies like that. I don't know if you guys have seen anything like that, but that sounds like potentially a good startup area.
I could imagine some output from your car and you can have a hot plate and make, cook breakfast or, do certain things, as long as it's not damaging the vehicle and you have the gear. But I haven't specifically seen it. In theory, yes, but how, I don't know.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think if memory serves, I think in newer EVs, that's becoming more of a feature, like the Ford Lightning and some Rivian SUVs have just more traditional outlets and more of them spread throughout the car. But in terms of using that huge battery bank for your home or a larger electrical system, I'm not quite sure. I'm sure some of those preliminary products are starting to enter the market, but that's another area where I'd imagine there's going to be a lot of growth and development in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah. There is a question, I think I skipped over at the top. Please discuss the direction of battery technology. I have heard that there are graphite batteries for cars as paint, which is a very interesting idea I have not heard of. But just generally to you guys, you know, what we've been talking about largely is lithium ion, right? That's pretty much everything that that is sold in the market in Oregon right now. If you're on grid, though there are lead acid batteries, but those have been around for a very long time. But in terms of like the future of where battery technology is going, do you have any insights on that?
Yeah, part of the reason we went to in-phase battery backup systems is it's a lithium iron phosphate chemistry. And so it's a little bit safer. We saw a lot of recalls with our Tesla and LG batteries for heat cascades. Basically, if it's punctured, often it's in your car. So what we were seeing nationwide is people pulling their car into their garage with the battery and hitting it, and then it causes a fire, causes a heat cascade. So the lithium iron phosphate's a safer battery chemistry in that if it's punctured or compressed, it's just going to stop functioning and cool off. But as far as the overall battery direction, you know, I hear stuff all the time from customers online, on little Facebook scrolling, you know, there's all sorts of stuff, but I try to tell most people anything you see, if they came with a brand new thing today, there's at least 10 years of R&D before it hits your house, before it's mass produced. So there's not anything overnight or in the 5-year window that's going to be really different from what you're seeing today. It's all small incremental stages. It's Nokia flip phone in 2004 to iPhone 37. You know, it's 2-3% better and 2-3% cheaper year over year, not, oh, there's something completely new and throw out everything you knew.
Yeah, and I'd just add, we've done some market research on this at Mayfield, and it really seems like lithium is here to stay. So lithium ion is kind of an umbrella term. Like Jim had mentioned, there's lithium iron phosphate is really the main battery chemistry that we're seeing today, and it's really growing in popularity in large part because it's really safe. They're hard batteries to break, they're hard batteries to ever light on fire. They're very good for a wide range of uses, and they offer good cycle life as well, so they're typically durable for a long period of time. So that's really where the industry is steering itself in the near term. There are always going to be new chemistries coming on board. More often than not, they're still going to be lithium based. Lithium just so happens to have the perfect chemical properties that make it ideal for batteries, at least for our use cases here. But I wouldn't be surprised if more enters the market. But overall, a lot of them are going for that lithium iron phosphate direction, which you may see just denoted as LFP. If you're doing some battery research, there's commonly LFP versus NMC is another lithium ion chemistry that we're more so moving away from. Like the original power walls were NMC chemistries. Moving forward, companies like Tesla and other battery manufacturers like Enphase are steering themselves more toward LFP, largely for that additional safety.
Great. And we've got a very healthy Q&A today. So we're going to try and go, Jim and Lucas, do you have any hard stops in your time? It is 4:04, but if we can keep going a little bit longer, I think we want to get some more info out here. So Linda asks, what are your expectations about how rapidly the cost of batteries will go down?
That's a tricky question, especially with inflation and raw material costs that we're seeing right now. For the first time since I've been doing solar costs have either flatlined or gone up, just because the parts that we buy, when I sell a job and we go buy all the parts, all those costs went up. Kind of like home builders, lumber prices double, the price of houses for a new house is going to go up. So I would say, and I often tell people, I have some people that I've been engaging with for years, and they're like, I'm waiting for when that battery system's $4,000. It's never going to be $4,000. It's always going to be a $10,000 to $15,000 on up construction project. It is a power plant at your house. The capacity, you're still, 5 years from now, you might still spend 15 grand, but what it's able to do and the user interface and everything is going to be much better. But I don't foresee a time when it's ever, unless there's subsidies or incentives that bring those costs down. I don't foresee it going rapidly down. I foresee it staying around the same, or maybe coming down very slightly over, a whole decade.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think we'll see gradual declines. The only thing that could really speed that up is heavy regulations and federal government involvement or local government involvement with more incentives, but you hate to bank on that. So just strictly looking at from product pricing without incentives, I would agree with Jim. I think they're slightly going to decline over time, but again, if it's something you're considering right now, we may not have a 26% federal tax credit for more than the next year or so. So will it drop 26% in the next 2 to 3 years? Very likely not. So again, if you are considering this now, I'd encourage looking at least getting a proposal to figure out what that cost could be in the near term.
Great, thank you. We have a couple of questions here about portable storage systems. I'm not sure how much you guys focus on those, but there is a product, for example, called Goal Zero, and some other products like it. And it's something that is not installed, it's not wired into your home, like one of the batteries that we've been talking about. Do you guys feel familiar enough that you're able to talk about what that is and the general use cases for that? And I guess the specific question here from Dan is, if the power grid goes out and you only have solar without storage, is there any way to charge something like a Goal Zero portable battery with your solar panels? So that's not just a question about Goal Zero. It's also a question about specifically solar without storage.
Usually, no, there are some products that allow you to island, as in there's sun right now, your solar's making 4,000 watts. You can have a single plug that can output 4,000 watts, but a cloud comes, it shuts off. Those systems are pretty expensive to get that infrastructure to have that capability. So you're like, oh, I've paid $8,000 to get that point. Might as well just pay a little bit more and actually get the battery. But I have seen those Goal Zero things, just on a wheel. It's basically like a big car battery that you just plug in, power goes out, you can run computers and charge phones and do basic stuff off of that, but without spending or retrofitting your existing equipment to be able to charge while the grid is off. Simple answer is no.
Great.
There are, like, with those Goal Zero things, there's all sorts of do-it-yourself systems where it's like a briefcase, you unfold it, you set it down, kind of like camping and RV solar projects. So, for that specific need to charge that small battery, you might only need, 1 or 2 small solar panels. So that would be the thing to pair with that small mobile Goal Zero battery for charging, but you're not running a refrigerator off that. You're charging cell phones or devices and just real basic stuff, or radios and whatnot.
Yeah, I think in general, the way to think of Goal Zero is it's really good for specific use cases, but it's a much smaller capacity. And so it's not something that you're going to realistically power the things that you need in your home. Right.
But if you're a diabetic and you have a small mini fridge and to keep your insulin cold, or you have a CPAP machine and you want that to run overnight and get a night or two, of sleep, then that could be a good cost-effective solution.
All right. So a question from Christine: how do we deal with potential supply shortage of lithium in the market? Do we see that as a potential bottleneck for lithium ion batteries? Jim, I'm sure you've got the nods going on.
Yeah, I mean, if what the world wants to do to go to a fully electric fleet, we need like 20 times the lithium mines that we currently have on the planet. And there's no signs that that is ramping up. So back to the battery price thing, it's a supply and demand issue. If lithium is really expensive, these batteries are going to be expensive. And there's not much of a will politically to mine lithium here in the US. It's one of the unfortunate things with that whole conversation is we get most of it from overseas.
All right. Dan asks, what is the solar industry's outlook about potential future financial incentives with regards to solar and storage? I'm happy to just answer that, kind of a boilerplate answer, unfortunately, which is that it's very difficult to predict future policies. Incentives that come up on the state level happen through the legislature, whether that is refunding an existing incentive or creating a new one. So you'll have to wait for the next legislative session, and it's so hard to read those winds. In terms of other incentives, Energy Trust of Oregon is able to, adjust their incentives or create new incentives without specific legislation. I can't really speak to what Energy Trust of Oregon is planning, but there is something of note, which was that in the 2021 legislative session in Oregon, there was a bill that refunded Energy Trust of Oregon. So they're going to have funding for another, I think it's 10 years, and also reoriented their priorities slightly as an organization to include access to energy, solar energy and storage for folks who haven't had access before, and also other distributed energy resources like energy storage. And so we may see an energy storage incentive from Energy Trust of Oregon. I can't speak to that, and I don't really want to promise anything. But I think that if you were to look at places where it's more predictable, Energy Trust of Oregon, they may have some things in the works, but totally TBD. Jerry's got a really great question, which is how long do batteries typically last?
That's going to depend, like everything else. Depends on how often you use it, how deeply you cycle your battery. So batteries are typically rated for what's called depth of discharge. So from 0 to 100%. Some batteries don't like to go below 50%. Some can go all the way down to very close to 0. Others fall somewhere in between. So how you use your battery and maintain your battery will go a long way in telling how long it should last. Different batteries come with warranties though, and they are giving you some information in advance telling you how many cycles can you expect from this battery. So how many times can you discharge it and charge it? And also in some cases, how many years it could last for. And I don't know if Jim, you have those numbers off the top of your head, but I think Enphase and Tesla are typically in the like 10,000 cycle range or roughly 10 years. But it varies product to product.
Yeah, and it's usually most of what you'll see is a 10-year warranty. Usually the cycle warranty isn't what you're going to hit. It's more of a lifetime thing because, very rarely are you fully discharging that battery over and over unless you have it set that way. But usually what you're going to see is the battery's warranted for somewhere between 70 to 80% of its capacity at year 10. There's kind of a linear warranty that they have over time. What I tell customers is if it's inside, it's going to last longer than if it's on a south facing wall, just out in the elements. But you can usually expect 10 to 12 years out of the life of a battery. And, if it's still working and functioning and fulfilling its needs at year 10, 11, 12, then keep it as long as you can. but expect to, a lot of these systems, a $15,000, $20,000 system in today's raw dollars, if you were to just replace that battery cell, you're still talking maybe $6,000, $7,000 for that raw part. A lot of the infrastructure that's already there has a 25-year life, and that's going to last a long time. It's more replacing the battery cell, like replacing a battery in a laptop or a phone, kind of long term.
Yeah, that's a great distinction. Last question here in the Q&A box, and then we are 15 minutes over time, so I am going to close it after that. But it's about just the wait time that you might expect for a battery. Elaine says that she's waiting for, Tesla says they're backed up for 18 months, which is quite a while. And so if you wanted storage now, I mean, what is the situation?
Part of that was COVID. Part of that is Tesla, and we're on a recorded line and supposed to be neutral, so I won't get too deep into it, but I would echo that story. I sold a Tesla Powerwall out in Gresham about a year and a half ago and still no part. So we'll see. I mean, other places saw a lot of backup. Generac and Enphase saw delay times of like 4 to 8 months with the trucker shortages and the tsunami from all that stuff. But if there are other products that you can get that are at Platt or CED that you could buy and install in a month or two. So there are other options that aren't on a supply chain length.
Yeah, I think it gets back to something that you mentioned at the beginning of your presentation, Zach. It's just the variety of products that are on the market today, and working with a contractor to think about what products they do offer, what's in their suite that's available to you, and then comparing from there what the timeline may be, because it will be different depending on which company you're sourcing your batteries from and who your distributor is and who's installing the battery for you. So again, I'd recommend reaching out to a contractor and seeing what they have available.
So this is akin to the experiment where you tell a child they can have a marshmallow now, or they can wait 10 minutes and have their marshmallow then, and testing their impulsivity. Maybe a little bit of that in the battery buying process. Very cool. Lucas Miller, Jim Steiner, thank you guys so much for being here. This has been recorded. If you want to, there was a ton of information. The recording will be sent out to everybody who registered for the event. And feel free to get in touch afterwards. I would love to hear what you thought was interesting, what you would like to hear more of. And happy Earth Day to everybody. I'm very happy to be diving into this topic with you all. So thanks for coming, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good weekend.
Thanks. Happy Earth Day.